tied as a sacrifice to the wolves, until a mysterious cowboy appeared. Elena had always loved the forest, even though the villagers warned her to stay away. Its tall, dark trees and winding paths seemed alive, whispering secrets with every rustle of leaves. When she was younger, she would sneak away from her small home at the edge of the village and wander among the trees, imagining that she could talk to the birds and understand the language of the wind. But as she grew older, the forest became a place of fear for the villagers. They said the wolves that lived deep in its shadows were not ordinary animals. They were punishers, spirits of the wild, meant to teach humans humility. Elena never believed entirely in such tales. Yet she could not deny the feeling that sometimes, when she walked too far, the forest seemed to watch her back. Her life had not been easy. Her family had fallen on hard times. Her father had died when she was little, leaving her mother to care for her and her younger brother, Thomas. Small house they lived in had one room for sleeping, a little kitchen, and a tiny shed for storing firewood. The village was poor, and neighbors often whispered when they passed by, blaming Elena's family for accidents or misfortune that seemed to shadow the village for years. When crops failed or livestock went missing, people murmured, "It is the house by the edge of the forest. That is where misfortune begins." Elena's mother tried to ignore the whispers, telling Elena and Thomas that people sometimes fear what they do not understand. But fear has a way of growing, and the villagers' stories became sharper, colder. One morning, Elena woke to find that the village council had gathered. Men and women she had known all her life, people she had laughed with and shared bread with, now looked at her with eyes full of suspicion. The mayor, a stern man with a deep voice, stepped forward. "Tonight," he said, "we must offer something to the forest. The wolves grow bolder. They take livestock, even children's chickens. They must be reminded that they do not rule over us." Elena's heart beat faster, and she felt a cold hand of fear close around her chest. She stepped back, confused. "What do you mean? Offer what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The mayor's gaze did not soften. "The forest accepts sacrifices," he said, desperate. "It is the only way to keep its anger away." Her mother's hands flew to her face, eyes wide with horror. Thomas clung to Elena's skirt, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Oh, not her!" he cried. But the villagers' fear had made them cruel, and courage often comes too late in such moments. Within an hour, Elena was surrounded. Hands grabbed her arms and tied her tightly with rough rope. "Best." She struggled, but her movements were slow against the strong hands of grown men. They dragged her toward the edge of the forest, where the trees began to darken and the shadows grew long, even in the light of late afternoon. Every step she took, the forest seemed to grow taller, the air heavier, and the whispers of leaves louder. When they reached a clearing near the forest, the villagers forced Elena to the ground. Her hands were bound behind her back, and the rope cut into her skin. Her heart pounded wildly, and the taste of fear was bitter in her mouth. Around her, the village elders murmured prayers, asking for protection, hoping their offering would please the spirits of the forest. Elena tried to keep her breathing steady, telling herself she had survived many things before, that she would survive this too. But the fear gnawed at her courage. A slow, relentless bite. As the sun began to sink behind the distant hills, Elena could hear the first sounds of the wolves. At first it was just a low growl, distant and uncertain. Then came the soft, haunting howls that echoed through the trees, carrying a warning. Elena's body shook, not just from fear, but from the cold wind that swept through the clearing. The shadows between the trees seemed to stretch toward her, growing larger, darker, alive. She could feel the eyes of the forest upon her, unseen, but very real. Her mind raced. She thought of her mother, of Thomas, of the tiny moments of laughter they had shared in their little home. She thought of her father's stories of bravery and kindness, stories that had always given her strength. And she thought of the forest, which had once felt like a friend. Could it be that somewhere in those trees, help might come? Or would this night be the end of her story?
Hours seemed to stretch endlessly. The wolves grew bolder, moving closer.
One appeared in the clearing, its eyes glowing yellow in the dim light. It circled her, sniffing the air, testing her presence. Elena froze, knowing that even a single wrong movement could provoke an attack. But something strange happened. The wolf did not leap. It stopped a few paces away, staring at her with what seemed like curiosity. Elena's mind raced for escape, but her arms were tied too tightly. Breaths. She tried to calm her shaking legs and take deep breaths, whispering to herself that the forest might be kinder than the villagers believed. She remembered how, when she was a child, she had spoken to the animals she saw in the woods, how she had learned to move silently, to observe rather than act. Perhaps that knowledge could help her now. The forest around her seemed alive in a way she had never noticed before. The leaves rustled like voices. The wind seemed to carry messages, and the shadows shifted as if forming shapes. Breath, every snap of a twig, every distant howl made her heart leap. Yet in the midst of fear there was also a strange, sharp clarity. She saw the wolves' patterns, their cautious movements, and understood that they were not just hunters. They were guardians, testing her. And then she heard it. The faint, unmistakable sound of hooves against the dirt path leading into the clearing. At first, she thought she might be imagining it, a trick of hope in her desperate mind. But the sound grew louder, steady and confident, approaching fast. Brasp. She squinted into the growing darkness but could see only a silhouette at the forest's edge, riding with a calm control she could not explain. Elena's hope sparked. Perhaps she would not be left alone with the wolves. Perhaps someone had come to save her from the forest shadow. Her muscles loosened slightly as she listened, waiting, praying that the figure would reach her before the wolves decided she was their prey. The first part of the night had been unbearable, a long stretch of fear, confusion, and helplessness. Breath. Yet in that moment the clearing seemed to hold its breath. Elena, tied and trembling, could only watch as the mysterious figure drew closer. The wolves paused, their yellow eyes reflecting the fading light, and for the first time she felt that maybe she had a chance to survive this night after all. Her heart beat with a mixture of fear and hope, and she whispered to the shadows, "Please, let someone come." The forest seemed to respond, holding its breath with her, waiting to see what the next moment would bring. Elena's heart raced faster than ever as the hooves grew louder, echoing through the clearing. The sound filled her ears and made her chest tighten, but it was not the wolves that frightened her now. It was the uncertainty. Who was coming, and would they reach her in time? She could see the shadow of a figure on horseback, tall and steady, moving with a confidence that seemed almost impossible in this wild, chaotic place. The wolves had stopped their circling, watching the approaching figure carefully. One of the larger wolves, its fur dark as night and eyes sharp as stars, growled low, a warning that resonated through the clearing. But even it seemed unsure. Elena felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her. Perhaps this stranger could save her. Perhaps she would not end the night tied, alone, and at the mercy of the forest. She tried to call out, but her voice barely escaped her lips. "Please, help," she whispered, almost a prayer. The wind carried her words, and the figure on horseback slowed, raising a hand as if acknowledging her. The clearing felt suspended in time. The wolves stared, tense but unmoving. Elena could see the muscles of the nearest wolf flex as it crouched slightly, ready to pounce at any sudden move. Her mind raced, trying to think of anything she could do. She wished she had not struggled so much earlier. She wished her arms were free. She wished she could run, but the ropes held her fast, cutting into her skin and leaving red marks. Minutes stretched, and every second felt like an hour. The stranger drew closer, revealing more details. A wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow over his face, a long coat fluttering in the wind, and strong, steady hands gripping the reins. He moved with a calmness that seemed impossible in such danger. Elena could feel the tension in the clearing shift slightly. The wolves sensed something too, and their growls lowered to cautious murmurs. Then the stranger stopped at the edge of the clearing. He dismounted smoothly, boots crunching on the dirt. He carried no visible weapons except a long leather whip, but the confidence in his stance made it clear he did not need more. Best! Elena's breath caught in her throat. Who was this man, and how could one person face so many wolves without fear? The wolves hesitated, circling back slightly, unsure if they should attack or wait. The stranger moved slowly toward Elena, his eyes calm and focused. He knelt beside her, reaching down to examine the ropes that bound her. "Peasy there," he said softly. His voice was low, steady, and carried a strange authority. "I'll get you free, just stay calm."
Elena wanted to believe him, but fear clawed at her chest.
"Dill," she began, but he placed a hand gently over her mouth. "Shh. They are watching, yes, but you are safe if you follow my lead. Do not panic." With careful hands, he began to untie the ropes. Elena felt the coarse fibers rub her wrists raw, but slowly, carefully, her arms were freed. She rubbed them, wincing at the small cuts, and tried to stand. The wolves watched from the shadows, their yellow eyes unblinking. "Keep your eyes on me," the stranger said, stepping back to put himself between her and the wolves. Breath. "Don't look at them. They sense fear." Elena obeyed, her gaze fixed on the man. She could feel the tension in her body start to ease just a little. Somehow his calmness transferred to her. Somehow she began to believe she might survive this night. The stranger began moving toward the wolves, his steps deliberate and slow. He did not shout, he did not swing his arms. Instead, he moved with the certainty of someone who had faced danger countless times. The wolves circled him, cautious but curious, sniffing the air. Elena could feel the forest itself holding its breath. Suddenly, one of the wolves lunged, faster than she could follow with her eyes. The stranger reacted instantly, cracking his whip with a sharp snap that echoed through the clearing. The sound startled the wolf, sending it skidding to a stop before it could reach him. The other wolves froze, confused by the sudden noise. Elena watched in awe. One person, calm, steady, and fearless, had managed to stop the attack without harming a single wolf. There was skill, yes, but there was also respect. The wolves were not mindless killers. They were intelligent, aware, and cautious. The stranger understood them in a way Elena could not yet comprehend. He returned to her side, kneeling once again. "Breaths. You need to move slowly," he said. "Follow me and do exactly as I say. Do not make sudden movements. They will test you, but if you remain calm, they will not touch you." Elena nodded, swallowing the lump of fear in her throat. She had never followed anyone like this before, but she could sense that this man was different, brave. He was wise, and he understood the forest in ways she could only imagine. Carefully, they began moving toward the edge of the clearing. The wolves followed, keeping a careful distance. Elena noticed something strange. They did not growl or charge. Instead, they moved in patterns, circling around the two of them, their eyes never leaving the man. It was as if they were communicating silently, testing him and her both. Elena's mind raced. She had always been taught to fear wolves, to think of them as monsters. But now, she could see their intelligence, their awareness. They were not evil. They were part of the forest, part of a natural balance that humans had long ignored. And the man, whoever he was, knew it. As they moved, Elena felt her own courage growing. Breaths. She had faced fear before, yes, but never like this, never with so much at stake. She remembered her mother's words. Fear often makes people cruel, and the villagers had been cruel to her, their fear turning into something almost unbearable. But here, in the forest, she could see that fear could also teach respect. Hours seemed to pass, though it could have been only minutes. The forest around them remained alive with sounds. The rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft, almost musical growls of the wolves. But Elena began to notice small details. The way the wind moved through the trees, the way shadows shifted, the way the wolves communicated with subtle gestures. Every sense was heightened, every movement deliberate. The stranger finally stopped at a small clearing near a stream, where the forest opened up just enough to give them space. He looked at Elena, his face serious. "You have done well," he said quietly. "Do not thank me yet. You still need to understand the forest." Elena nodded, too breathless for words. She wanted to ask who he was, why he had appeared at this precise moment, but she also knew it was not the time. Right now, survival was all that mattered. The wolves, sensing that they were no longer an immediate threat, began to retreat slowly into the trees. Their eyes lingered on Elena for a moment longer, intelligent and cautious, then vanished into the darkness. Elena's knees gave way slightly, and she almost collapsed, but the man caught her, steadying her. "You are stronger than you think," he said. "Fear is natural, but it can also be controlled. Remember this lesson. The forest tests, but it also teaches." Elena looked around at the dark trees, still alive with shadows and unseen eyes. She realized that tonight had changed everything. She was no longer just a frightened girl at the mercy of superstition. She was someone who had faced true fear and survived. And she knew, somehow, that this was only the beginning. As they moved deeper into the forest, Elena kept glancing at the man beside her. He was silent, watchful, and mysterious. She had no idea who he was or why he had come, but she knew she owed him her life. For the first time in hours, maybe for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. The forest remained dark and alive, but the terror that had once gripped her heart had loosened. She could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong, and she could feel the strength in her legs, in her mind, in her spirit. She had faced the wolves and survived. She had felt fear at its sharpest edge and had been saved by a stranger who seemed to know the forest better than anyone could. And as they walked together toward the unknown, Elena understood one thing clearly. The forest was no longer just a place of fear. It was a place of learning, a place of life, and perhaps a place where courage could grow even in the darkest night. Elena walked carefully beside the stranger, her legs still trembling from the fear and adrenaline of the night. The forest was alive around them, filled with sounds she had never noticed before. The soft rustle of leaves, the distant crack of twigs under unseen feet, the occasional hoot of an owl echoing through the tall trees. Each sound reminded her of how close danger had been and how close it still could be. The stranger walked with calm purpose, his boots making soft impressions in the dirt. Elena could see the strength in his movements, the confidence in every step, but there was also a quiet awareness, a deep connection to the forest that she could not understand. His hat shaded his face, leaving his eyes in darkness. but his presence alone made her feel safer than she had in hours, or perhaps in her entire life. "You are safe for now," he said, his voice low and steady.
"But the forest will test you again if we stay here too long. You need to understand that danger is not always what you expect."
Breath.
Elena nodded, still catching her breath.
"Who are you?"
She asked, her voice small but filled with curiosity.
"Why did you come? How did you know I was in danger?" He looked down at her briefly, then back at the forest. "My name is Colton. I travel these lands, helping when I can. I know the forest better than most, and I know the wolves. They are not evil, but they are strict teachers.
They sense when someone is afraid, and they test that fear."
Elena tried to absorb his words. It was difficult to imagine that the wolves were anything other than dangerous, but after seeing them hesitate in his presence, she could almost believe it. Breaths. "So they weren't going to hurt me?" she asked quietly. "They might have," Colton said, "but they also respect courage and intelligence. You showed both."
"That is why you are alive."
She wanted to speak, to thank him, but words failed her. Instead, she followed him silently, careful not to step on dry leaves or twigs that might signal their presence. The forest felt different now, less threatening yet still powerful, full of life that demanded respect. After walking for what felt like hours, they came to a small clearing with a stream running through it. Moonlight danced on the water, reflecting silvery shapes on the surface. Colton gestured for Elena to sit on a flat rock near the stream. "Breaths." She obeyed, her muscles stiff and sore. "You need to rest," he said. "You've been through a lot, and your body needs strength to survive what comes next."
Elena looked at him, curious. "What comes next?" she asked.
Colton's eyes remained on the forest.
"The villagers will not be pleased that you survived. They feared the forest, and they feared what it would do if their offering failed. We cannot return to them yet."
"We must understand the forest first, learn its ways, and find a way to protect you." Elena shivered, partly from exhaustion and partly from the weight of his words. She had thought the worst was over when the wolves stopped their approach, but now she realized that danger was not only outside, in the shadows. It could be everywhere, even in the people who were supposed to care for her. Colton handed her a small bundle of food, simple bread and dried meat. "Eat," he said. "Desk. You need energy." Breath. She accepted it, nibbling slowly while watching him. He ate as well, silently, eyes constantly scanning the forest. There was a sense of tension, but it was controlled, focused. Elena felt the difference between his calm and the fear she had experienced with the villagers and the wolves. As she ate, Elena tried to remember all she had learned from the brief encounter with the wolves. They were cautious, intelligent, and aware of every movement. Right. They had circled her, tested her, and then stopped when Colton arrived. Something about the way he moved, the way he held himself, seemed to speak to the wolves in a language she could not hear. "You seem to understand them?" She said softly. "How do you?" Colton smiled faintly, though it did not reach his eyes. "I have spent years learning. Wolves, like the forest, are teachers. They punish foolishness, fear, and cruelty. They respect courage, thoughtfulness, and patience. Many who enter these woods see only danger. Few see lessons." Elena thought about the villagers, about how easily they had accepted fear as truth, how they had almost offered her as a sacrifice, without hesitation. She realized how much she had taken courage for granted, even in small ways. Breath. And yet, here she was, alive, learning from the forest itself. They rested by the stream until the moon rose high, painting silver paths across the dark water. The night was quiet now, but not silent. The whispers of the forest seemed to carry messages, and Elena felt a strange connection growing within her. Fear was still present, but it was tempered by awareness and understanding. Colton finally spoke again. Narration. You must remember this. Fear is not your enemy. Misunderstanding is. You saw the wolves as monsters at first, but they were testing you. They are a reflection of the forest's will. If you respect them, they will respect you. If you panic, they will respond accordingly. Elena nodded slowly. Breaths. She felt the truth in his words. Fear had almost killed her, but now understanding was keeping her alive. She realized that survival was not about fighting blindly. It was about awareness, respect, and patience. Hours passed, and the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees. Elena felt a quiet sense of hope. She had survived the night, learned lessons she could not have imagined, and discovered strength she had not known she possessed. And all this was because of the stranger beside her, the mysterious man who seemed to know the forest better than anyone else. Colton stood, stretching slightly, and gestured for her to follow. We must move, he said. Breath. The forest will guide us, and we must remain attentive. There are still lessons to learn, and you must be prepared for what comes next. Elena rose, her legs stiff, but her resolve firm. She followed him through the forest, paying close attention to his movements, to the subtle changes in the air, to the quiet rustle of leaves that might indicate danger. The wolves had not returned, but their presence was felt in every shadow, in every whisper of the wind. As they walked, Colton shared small lessons about the forest, how to move quietly, how to observe without disturbing, how to sense the patterns of life that many overlooked. Elena absorbed everything, her mind sharpening, her senses awakening. She felt as if the forest itself was teaching her, through him, how to survive, how to respect, how to understand. By mid-morning, they reached a small ridge overlooking the village. Elena paused, looking down at the rooftops and smoke rising from chimneys. The village seemed peaceful, almost normal, but she knew better. She remembered the fear in the villagers' eyes, the cruel confidence with which they had tied her, the way they had almost sent her to her death. Desperate, Colton noticed her gaze and spoke quietly. You cannot return yet. They are not ready to understand. Fear is too strong there, but you are ready in time. You will help them learn, just as you are learning from the forest. Elena nodded, a new determination growing inside her. She was no longer the same girl who had been tied and left in the clearing. Learned from it and survived. She was someone who had faced fear, learned from it, and survived. She was someone who could change, and perhaps one day help change others. As they descended the ridge and moved toward safer paths, Elena felt the first true sense of freedom she had experienced in hours, maybe even days. The forest was no longer a place of terror. It was a teacher, a protector, and a place of awakening. And the man beside her, silent and watchful, was not just a rescuer, but a guide into a world she had never known. The wolves were still out there, somewhere in the shadows, but they no longer seemed like monsters. They were part of a balance that humans often forgot, and Elena understood that in surviving, she had been given a rare gift, a chance to see the world differently, to respect its power, and to learn from it. And so, with the forest around them alive and watching, Elena and Colton moved forward, deeper into understanding, deeper into survival, and closer to the mysteries that would soon reveal themselves.
The night had been won, but the story was far from over.
The sun was just rising, casting golden streaks across the tops of the trees, when Elena realized how exhausted she truly was.
Her body ached from hours of walking, and her arms and legs were still sore from being tied.
Bet Yet her mind was sharper than ever. The night in the forest had changed her. Fear no longer ruled her thoughts. Curiosity and awareness had taken its place. Colton moved beside her silently, his eyes constantly scanning the trees, the underbrush, and the sky above. Elena had learned by now that every pause, every glance, every movement he made carried meaning. He was alert, cautious, and yet calm, as if danger was always nearby but never overwhelming. There was an unspoken confidence in him that made her feel safe, even in a forest that had moments before felt like a trap. After walking for what felt like miles, they stopped at a hidden clearing, small and protected by a circle of old trees. A gentle stream ran through it, and sunlight danced on the rippling water. It was a peaceful place, almost untouched by humans. Colton gestured for Elena to sit on a rock, and she obeyed, letting exhaustion take over for a moment. "Bert, you've learned much," Colton said quietly, his voice breaking the stillness. "But there is more to understand. The forest is not just a place, it is alive, and it has rules. Wolves are only a part of that system. They act as guides and tests, teaching humans about balance, patience, and respect."
Elena listened carefully. Every word seemed heavy with meaning, yet clear in a way that made sense even to her.
She thought back to the night, to the fear that had nearly paralyzed her, and to the courage she had discovered within herself. "I understand," she said slowly. "I think I do. At least a little." Colton nodded, though his expression remained serious. "Understanding is not enough. You must act with knowledge, not just instinct. Fear and ignorance make humans reckless. And the villagers, you will see, they live with fear. They do not understand what it means to respect the forest, and soon you will have to face them." Breaths. Elena's stomach tightened at the thought. She had survived the wolves, yes, but returning to the village would not be easy. The same people who had tied her up, who had almost sent her to her death, still lived there. Their fear of the forest and of her family was too strong. She had been a victim once. Could she confront them now, armed only with courage and knowledge? Colton seemed to sense her worry. "Do not think of it as confrontation," he said. "Think of it as teaching. They fear because they do not know. You survived because you listened, because you observed, because you understood."
You can help them learn that same truth. Elena looked down at her hands, remembering the ropes that had cut into her skin.
She shivered, partly from the memory, partly from a growing determination.
I want to help, she said quietly.
"I want them to understand, so no one else has to be hurt." Colton's eyes softened slightly. "Good. That is the first step. Courage without purpose is wasted. Courage with understanding is powerful." They rested for a while, eating a small meal Colton had prepared. As they ate, Elena noticed that Colton seemed different in the daylight. At night, he had been almost untouchable, a mysterious figure who appeared like a shadow. In the morning light, she could see the faint lines of worry on his face, the muscles tense from years of survival, and the eyes that had seen much more than she could imagine. Yet there was kindness there too, buried beneath the hard exterior. After eating, Colton began to teach Elena how to move quietly through the forest. He showed her how to step lightly on soft earth, how to read the tracks of animals, how to notice the signs of approaching danger. Each lesson was small but meaningful. Elena learned to observe the details that had once gone unnoticed. The broken branch that showed a wolf had passed, the bent grass that indicated a deer had been nearby, the subtle sounds of wind that carried messages of movement and life. Hours passed and Elena began to feel more confident in her movements. She realized that she had grown stronger, not just physically, but mentally. The forest was no longer frightening. It was challenging. It demanded attention, respect, and understanding, and in return, it offered knowledge, safety, and growth. As they walked deeper into the forest, Colton began to speak of his past. Elena had been curious since the moment he appeared, but she had not asked. Now, she could no longer resist.
Who are you, really? She asked.
Desperately, I was in the forest and the wolves. Why did you come for me?
Colton paused, looking at her with eyes that held shadows of memories she could not yet understand.
I have lived in these lands for many years, he said slowly. I have learned the ways of the forest, the language of the wolves, and the truths that humans often forget.
I came for you because you were in danger, yes, but also because I sensed something in you.
Something that can learn, survive, and grow. You have a strength many do not. Elena felt a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. She had survived by chance, by courage, and by the help of this mysterious man. But now she realized that there was more to it than luck. There was a reason she had been chosen to face this challenge. Perhaps in some way she had a purpose beyond simply surviving. Colton continued, his voice calm but serious. The villagers' fear is strong. They do not understand the balance of nature, the power of the forest, or the intelligence of the wolves. They see only danger and superstition. You will help them understand.
Ooh. You will teach them, just as the forest has taught you. Elena nodded slowly.
The thought of returning to the village still made her anxious, but she felt a new sense of determination. She was no longer a frightened girl. She had faced real danger and survived. She had learned lessons that many would never understand. And now, with Colton's guidance, she could take those lessons back to the people who needed them most. As they walked, Colton began to share more about the wolves and their role in the forest. They are not mere animals, he explained. They are guardians. They test humans, teaching them humility, patience, and respect. Many who enter the forest do so with fear, anger, or ignorance. Few leave it with understanding.
You have passed the first test!
But there is more to learn. Elena listened intently, absorbing every word. She began to see the forest not as a place of danger, but as a living, breathing teacher. Each tree, each animal, each shadow had a purpose. Each sound carried information. And she realized that her survival depended not on brute strength, but on awareness, respect, and understanding. As the day wore on, they reached a part of the forest that was even denser, with trees so tall their tops were lost in mist. Colton stopped and looked around carefully. Breaths. Here, he said. You will learn patience. You must wait and watch. Inspiration. The forest has a lesson for you, but it cannot be rushed. Elena settled down, sitting quietly and observing. She noticed birds moving in patterns, small animals darting among the roots, and the way shadows shifted as the sun moved across the sky. Time seemed to stretch, but she remained alert, learning from the smallest details. Hours passed. She felt her mind and body grow stronger, more aware. Breaths. She realized that courage was not just about facing danger. It was about understanding it, respecting it, and moving through it with intelligence. She thought about the night with the wolves and how close she had been to losing everything. Desperation. She thought about Colton and his calm, steady presence, and she realized that guidance and trust were as important as courage. When the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Colton finally spoke. You have learned well today, he said. But tomorrow we return to the village. You will need all your strength, your knowledge, and your courage. The villagers are not ready for the truth, but you are.
And you will guide them. Elena felt a mixture of fear and determination.
Returning to the village would not be easy. There would be challenges, resistance, and perhaps even anger. But she knew she was no longer helpless. She had been tested, trained, and strengthened. She had faced true fear and survived. And now, with Colton's guidance, she was ready to face the next challenge.
As they made camp for the night, Elena looked up at the darkening sky. Stars began to appear, twinkling like tiny beacons of hope.
Just like the forest, life was full of lessons, some harsh, some gentle, but all important. And she felt a quiet determination growing within her. First, she would survive. She would learn. And she would help others understand the power and wisdom of the world around them. The forest was no longer a place of terror. It was a place of knowledge, courage, and awakening. And Elena, who had been tied and left as a sacrifice, was no longer the same girl who had entered it, for she was stronger, wiser, and ready to face the world, starting with the village that had once feared her.
Elena felt a strange mixture of fear and determination as she approached the edge of the village.
From a distance, the small houses and dusty streets seemed calm in the morning light. Smoke rose from chimneys, and a few villagers went about their daily chores, unaware that their world was about to change.
Breaths. She clutched Colton's arm briefly for reassurance. He gave a small nod, his calm presence steadying her nerves.
You are ready, he said softly. Remember what you have learned. Fear is powerful, but respect and understanding are stronger. Show them that. Elena took a deep breath and stepped forward. The villagers noticed her immediately. Whispers began to spread like wildfire. Faces turned, and eyes narrowed with suspicion and fear. The same people who had tied her and left her in the forest now stared at her as she approached, a mix of disbelief and worry in their expressions.
The mayor came forward first, his face red with anger and confusion. "Elena!" he shouted.
Where have you been?
"Do you know what we thought had happened to you?" Elena stopped a few steps away, her eyes scanning the crowd.
I have been in the forest, she said clearly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. And I have learned many things. I am alive not because of fear, but because I understood. And I am here to help you understand as well. Desperatum. The villagers murmured among themselves, unsure whether to believe her or dismiss her words. Fear still lingered in their eyes, but curiosity began to peek through. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the lessons of the forest guiding her words.
You feared the wolves, she continued.
Brace. You thought they were monsters that needed to be punished, that the forest demanded sacrifices. But that is not true. The wolves are not evil. They are guardians. They test courage, intelligence, and respect. They punish ignorance, yes, but they also teach. And tonight they spared me because I did not run blindly, because I observed, and because I understood. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some villagers shook their heads, unable to accept what they were hearing. Others looked uncertain, glancing at each other as if seeking confirmation. The mayor's face darkened. And why should we believe you, he demanded. You were alone. How do you know what the forest wants? Elena looked directly at him, meeting his gaze with courage she had never known she possessed. I know because I lived it, she said. I faced the wolves. I faced the fear that lives in the forest and in your hearts. And I survived. You will survive too, if you learn to respect the forest and the life around you instead of fearing it blindly. The villagers fell silent. Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that could not be ignored.
They had always acted out of fear, but Elena's calm, steady voice brought a new perspective. For the first time, some of them began to question their own actions and beliefs. A small child stepped forward from the crowd, wide-eyed and curious. "Are the wolves—"
"Brother, really not evil?" he asked softly.
Elena smiled gently.
"No," she said. "They are like teachers. They show us what we need to learn. They respect courage, patience, and understanding."
"They will not harm those who respect the forest and life." The mayor shook his head stubbornly. "And what of this man?" he asked, glancing at Colton. "Why did he appear?"
How do we know he is not part of some trick? Colton stepped forward, his presence commanding yet calm. "I am here to guide, not to harm," he said.
"Prince, the forest is alive and watches over its own. I am only a messenger, a protector. Fear does not come from the forest. It comes from misunderstanding. The lessons are clear if you are willing to see them." Brave. Some villagers looked at Colton with a mix of awe and fear. His confidence, his calm, and the way the wolves had responded to him left little doubt that he was telling the truth. Elena felt a surge of gratitude for him, realizing that without his guidance, her words might have fallen flat.
She continued, addressing the entire village.
You have lived in fear for generations, believing that superstition is truth. But fear can blind you.
It can make you cruel. It can make you do things you will regret. I was almost offered as a sacrifice, tied up because of fear,
but I survived, and I am here to show you that there is another way. Respect the forest. Respect life. Learn from it, and you will not be afraid. Slowly, the crowd began to quiet down. The mayor clenched his fists, but even he seemed affected by Elena's words. Some villagers whispered to each other, doubt creeping in where certainty had once ruled. The forest had taught her courage, and now she was teaching it to them. A few brave villagers stepped forward, asking questions about what she had seen in the forest. Elena described the wolves, their intelligence, the way they tested her, and the lessons she had learned from Colton. She explained the importance of observation, patience, and understanding. Colton occasionally added detail, explaining the balance of nature and the role of the wolves as protectors. By midday, the mood had shifted. Fear was not gone, but it had been tempered by knowledge and curiosity. The villagers could no longer see Elena as a helpless girl. She had faced danger, learned from it, and returned stronger. Her courage was a living example, impossible to ignore. The mayor finally spoke, his voice quieter now, though still tinged with stubbornness. "Perhaps we were wrong," he admitted grudgingly. "We feared what we did not understand. And in our fear, we almost destroyed one of our own." Elena nodded. "It is never too late to learn," she said.
"The forest and the wolves are not enemies. They are teachers."
This. And if you are willing to listen, they will guide you, just as they guided me.
As the villagers absorbed her words, Colton gave a small nod to Elena.
She felt pride and relief, knowing she had survived not just the forest, but the fear of her own people. She had grown stronger, wiser, and braver. The forest had tested her, and she had passed. Now it was her turn to guide others. Later, as the sun began to set, the village seemed quieter, more thoughtful. Some villagers had ventured toward the forest edge, cautiously observing the trees and the shadows, trying to see the world through Elena's eyes. Fear was still there, but it had softened, replaced by curiosity and respect. The balance between humans and nature, once forgotten, was beginning to return. Elena stood at the edge of the forest, looking out over the village and back at the trees where she had faced the wolves. Her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and gratitude. Bas. She had survived, learned, and grown, and she knew that her life would never be the same. Colton appeared beside her silently, his eyes scanning the forest. "You have done well," he said. "You have faced fear, survived, and taught others to see beyond it. That is the beginning of change." Elena smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "You could have. I only guided you. The courage, the intelligence, the patience, it was always within you. I only helped you see it." The first stars began to appear in the sky, twinkling above the forest and village.
Elena felt the cool night air on her skin, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the quiet presence of the wolves somewhere in the distance.
They had returned to the shadows, guardians once more, but she knew they were watching, approving of the change that had begun. For the first time, Elena felt truly free. She had faced darkness and danger, survived the forest and the wolves, confronted human fear and superstition, and emerged stronger, wiser, and braver than she had ever been. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. She had learned that knowledge and respect could transform fear into understanding, and she had learned that even one person, guided by courage and wisdom, could change the hearts of many. As she looked toward the village, Elena knew that life would continue, challenges would come, but she was ready. The forest had tested her, the wolves had guided her, and the mysterious cowboy had shown her the way. Breath. And now she was ready to live, to teach, and to protect the balance that the forest demanded. And so, with the stars shining above and the forest standing silent and proud behind her, Elena stepped forward, no longer a frightened girl tied as a sacrifice, but a young woman, strong, wise, and free. The village had seen courage. The forest had shared its lessons, and the wolves had remained guardians. And in that moment, everything had changed.